Well, Shabbat Shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. And this is Barbara. I'm serving as your host today. And I hope that you will go to our website for more information about the Creator Sabbath. And that is lunarsabbathday.com. Today you have joined our fellowship group. We have a wonderful circle here of friends and fellowship that we enjoy so much. And we just are going to ask others today, how did they find the Sabbath? How did they find the true Sabbath? Maybe you're like me, you grew up in a Saturday keeping church, as I am fourth generation Seventh-day Adventist, and I guess I'm the black sheep of the family here, and I came out of the church in 1994, and I found the Lunar Sabbath in 2011. But, we all feel like we're alone. So I thought maybe you would like to hear from other people that have been on the same walk that you're on today. And Sister M is here first, and I hope others will join with their story. Go ahead, Sister M.
Okay, well, briefly, how my journey started with the True Sabbath was very surprising to me in the way that the Father went about it. I had already come out of Seventh-day Adventist Church and was visiting the Messianic congregations, still keeping the Saturday as Shabbat. While I was at work, working on a Friday, my coworker asked me, we were together working in a caregiving situation, and she asked me, so are you working tomorrow? And it was a Friday, and I looked at her like, yeah, of course, you know that I go to church on Saturday, so I am not working tomorrow. And she said something that really took my breath away, and it was simply a comment that she made. She said, I'd keep Sabbath if I knew which calendar to use. And I thought, well, duh, don't you have a calendar? You just look at the calendar is Saturday's the seventh day. And this is what I've always been taught, and I never question whether there's another calendar. And I was about to say that, but then the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit of Yah, said, be quiet, just don't even answer. It literally took my breath away. And I thought, okay, I didn't know there was another calendar. And I only knew of the calendar we have now. And so then I started researching, praying about it, and discovered there's so many calendars. There has been so many changes in history. So what is the true calendar? And I prayed about it and discovered that there's different ways of keeping Sabbath from creation. That there's the lights, the sun, moon, and stars. But then I discovered there's other groups keeping Sabbath, like on a full moon, as new moon, and it became confusing to me. And basically I asked the Father, I am not going to be able to understand this unless you reveal it to me. And I studied for 2 weeks. I found Barbara's videos online, and I found also Matthew Jansen's videos on the new moon. And that made total sense to me. And the way the Father teaches me something new is he teaches me through Scripture. So I went through the Strong's Concordance on a study on the new moon. What is the new moon? And then I look at the historical evidence and how his people practiced that specific instruction that I'm learning. And historically, Israel used the lunar solar calendar. So then it only took about 2 weeks. I was deep in study, and then I gave my, I jumped in. I didn't understand everything, but I jumped in. I was excited, and I felt like a little child. I didn't have to understand everything. I just knew that I wanted to obey and trust the Father providing for me. And He has with my job situations. He has really blessed me and given me favor. I've changed to different jobs which have been more accommodating for my calendar keeping. So that's how the Father led me to Shabbat, finding this true Shabbat. I remember coming on the call with you, Barbara, and I was in tears because I was so happy to find the true Sabbath. And I felt so connected with the Creator, looking at the moon which He made for His appointed times. So thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Brother Phil.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I just wanted to say, I gave my testimony before. I just wanted to say this time again. When I first found the Lunar Sabbath, it was I was online. I was doing some other studies, and I had a subscription that I've from a young lady. Her name was Lady Gracie, and I used to follow her for like a while, and then I noticed I didn't see her in about almost close to like a year. I didn't see any new posts or anything, and it was in my mind to kind of, if I don't see any new posts in a while, much like a year, I would remove the subscription because probably the person is not doing it anymore. But something told me to don't do it, just leave it. And then lo and behold, about a week later, I saw a post. And I was like, oh, okay, she posted again. So I just started to look at it. And it was on the reason why she hasn't been seen for a while, and also about the Lunar Sabbath. So I kind of chimed in and took a listen, and became very interested in what I was hearing. And she gave the website for where we are now on the LSD, the Lunar Sabbath Day website. And I went on and I just started reading and watching videos, and it was very extensive. It covered a lot of areas that I did not even know, or that no one was even speaking about, like when the day begins, and the calendar. And I was like, wow, I'm surprised I never heard of this before. And so I kind of just continued studying, and then I went on to World's Last Chance website. I was studying there a little more, and that's basically how I became knowledgeable about the Lunar Sabbath Day. And like so many other people, I became the only one that was actually interested in or studying this. And but I'm very happy that the Lord had led me to this, because it wasn't even, I studied a lot of things before, and it would take me like a while, or you have to do a lot of more research and everything. But everything was very quick. It wasn't hard to grasp or even to accept. It was like the Spirit just said, this is what the truth is, and just follow. And it's been that easy. And I've been sharing it ever since. A friend of mine, he also is from a Messianic background, not a Seventh-day Adventist background, but like myself, but a Messianic background. And he basically had questions about, well, don't the Jews keep it, and so on and so on. And I ran into the history that I read and showed him where, in the story about Hillel and the second and so forth, and he was blown away. And we always studied together and everything, but he just said one day he called me. He said he's going to speak to his wife about it, but then one day they both called me on the phone and said, we're all in. We want to learn more based on the Lunar Sabbath Day website and what they read. So I'll just thank Yah for his spirit and guiding and leading and how simple it was. And I love studying truth. I have no problem with dropping what I knew before if it is true. And if the new things that I'm learning is untruthful, I have no problem with that. I'm not attached to anything. But if it's God's truth, I'm there. And that was my testimony.
Wow, Brother Phil, it's so awesome that your friends you shared with that were keeping the faith, Messianic group, and they believe too. It's so wonderful to be able to share, and then to have people say, yeah, we believe it too, we're all in. That's really beautiful. That's so rewarding.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Jackie. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thank
Yes.
you. I'm sorry. I was waiting. I loved hearing that testimony, and I was waiting, but my children found me. So I may not have to be able to share as much as I wanted to, but I did want to say something. The last two people said, they kind of heard it, and it just resonated as truth, and they were able to do it. And I'm so pleased to hear that, because I've been on this journey for what feels like a long time until I hear somebody else, and how people are catching on now. And when the world's become so full of deception is just beyond my comprehension. So I just thank the Rosh Hodesh for making it clear to people. It wasn't that clear to me. I went to go on a lot of different paths to finally find this and find where we are. I also did the full moon for a while. I also did the Saturdays for a while. I was a Sunday person growing up, and I'm so grateful. And I'm sorry, you can hear my children in the background. But what I did want to really say is that this particular full moon that's happening right now, it's had a big, I don't know if anyone else witnessed this wherever you are in the world, but it had a big red ring around it. And we call this the red moon, and it comes a couple times. It's not that, unrare. But my understanding in my study is that this is a moon of change. It's a season of change. It's a big super moon. It seems to be a full moon for days. I don't know if you've noticed that. That's how it felt for me. And it's a time of change. And it's last year this time, on Yahuwah's calendar, when this moon came at this season, I remember a really big change happening, and I remember knowing a big change was coming because of this moon. And so for those of you that are newer, or those of you who are still figuring it out, and trust me, I don't know much, but what I do know is that if we keep our eye on the sky, we can know what's coming. Because this year I saw this moon coming, I felt it coming, and there, bam, something came, and it didn't shock me. It didn't surprise me as much as usual, because I felt forewarned. I knew that was going to happen. And I just thank the Heavenly Father for these gifts, for people saying the words we need to know, for people sharing their testimonies, and for his signs in the sky. There can be 80 million calendars. I don't care. There's only one sun, one moon, a couple of stars with directions, and there's only one king above all kings. So I believe that he's given that calendar for everybody to access. And those who don't want to look at his calendar, don't worry about it. We will. We will look at his calendar every day. Hallelujah. Bless all of you. I have to get back to my children. Shabbat shalom, and just keep calm and carry on, because it's a tough season, everybody. Hallelujah.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. And we're so glad to hear the children, too. The children are so important, and we're so glad you are here and you're able to share. And the signs in the heavens are never going to change. That's right. And no man can touch that calendar up there. And so it's safe. The Father, the Creator, he put it up there in the heavens where nobody can mess with it, and it's still there. And we can watch for those signs, and that's wonderful. And we each have a different story on the path that we're in, and the path that the Father chose for us. Leticia, thank you for coming on. Okay, Leticia, and then Ellie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good to hear you.
Hi, everybody. Happy Sabbath. So my journey to learning about the Lunar Sabbath, I grew up as a missionary Baptist, and by the time I got to junior high, we had stopped going to church. And so I really didn't know a whole lot about the Bible. Then as an adult, I came back to the church, but I mean, they weren't really teaching us anything about prophecy, it was just, I guess a feel-good thing, and it was all about the music and, the preacher kind of up there hooping and hollering, that kind of thing. So then I started going to non-denominational churches, and once again, it was pretty much about the music. And I had moved to North Carolina, and I got a flyer in the mail about a prophecy seminar, and I had become very interested in Bible prophecy, end-time prophecy, and so I went to the seminar, and it was with a Seventh-day Adventist church, and I had, become convinced that the Sabbath was on Saturday, so I joined the Seventh-day Adventist church thinking, that they had all of this truth and all of this knowledge that I didn't have before. And then some years into being a Seventh-day Adventist, I heard about the Lunar Sabbath, and I tried to listen to a couple of studies online and everything, but it just didn't click. It didn't make sense to me. And so I just let that go, and I continued with being, Seventh-day Adventist, and I was a Seventh-day Adventist for about 15, 16 years. And then earlier this year, I saw that online, Miss Lady Gracie, her video about the Lunar Sabbath, and a couple of videos after that, she was talking about why she was leaving the Seventh-day Adventist church because of this new belief that she found. And when I saw the first video about the Lunar Sabbath, I was like, oh, Lord, here we go about the Lunar Sabbath again. And I was going to just not look at it. And then I was like, well, let me just see what she's talking about. And when I looked at the video, I was like, wow. I mean, it made sense to me where the other studies that I had looked at, it just didn't click to me. So I followed along with her videos, and she, gave you guys' website, and I started watching the websites. I started watching the videos on you guys' website and following along with my Bible, and I was like, I can't deny this. This is the truth. So, that's when I left the Seventh-day Adventist church and, started joining with the study with you guys on the Sabbath of the Lunar Sabbath.
Ellie is next. Yeah, Martin was here, but Martin left. Ellie is next, and then Peggy and Appa, I guess.
Okay, I'll tell my story. It's very similar to the other lady, only I was raised Catholic, and I was Catholic my whole life. And I was very similar to her, where we received a poster in the mail, or a postcard, I guess, about a prophecy series. So we went to it, and both my husband and I was away. I was a travel agent, so I was always traveling and going to shows. And when I came home, he kept the flyer, and he said, well, we missed a few days, but why don't we go? And I said, okay. So anyway, we've ended up becoming Seventh-day Adventists. We thought we had finally learned the true Sabbath. And I was a Seventh-day Adventist, not quite as long as her, probably, I would say maybe 5 to 6 years, if that, before I read something in the Bible. and I went to my pastor in the church, and it was to do with the feast. And he said, oh, no, we don't keep the feasts anymore. They're done away with. And I said, well, it says here we're to keep them forever. It doesn't say that they're done away with. We keep them forever. And he said, oh, no, they were all nailed to the cross when our Lord died. So I sort of forgot about it for a couple of years, but the Lord never left me. He kept nagging at me, and I kept finding things on the feast. Finally, I received a book on the feast, and I read it, and that made perfect sense to me. And it was like it never left me. The Lord kept constantly after me. And so I went back. This time it was another pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist church, and I approached him. And he admitted that he had done the feast. He was an engineer. He had done the feast, and he had left the engineer, and he became a pastor. But he says, oh, no, we don't do the feast anymore, he says. And I realized that he probably couldn't do the feast when he became a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, so he had to give it up. Otherwise, he'd have been shot out of the church. So anyway, but he understood where I was coming from because he had done the feast himself for quite a few years. And anyway, so I eventually at that point started to really question. And I knew in my heart that the feasts were what we were supposed to be doing, but I had no idea of how to do the feast because I didn't know anybody that did the feast. And then I met somebody in the church by accident one day. This was after our service, and we have a potluck, and we had a guest there. And the first thing she did when she sat down with me, she looked at me and she said, are you a feast keeper? And I said, what? I was just shocked at her comment because I couldn't believe she was asking me that because she was a Seventh-day Adventist. And I said, what are you talking about? She says, well, I'm a feast keeper. Are you a feast keeper? And so I started to tell her, I think we're supposed to keep the feast, and I believe in the feast. So anyway, I was invited through another friend of hers that she was at the church with, I was invited to go to a feast in the springtime, the Feast of Passover. So I went, and that's when I met you, Barbie, and you gave me a bunch of things. Yeah, you're laughing. But you gave me a bunch of things on Lunar Sabbath, and I actually had Wanda tell me some things that she was talking to somebody, and I was sitting down one day when Wanda was talking, and I said, this doesn't make any sense. How can you have a Lunar Sabbath when we're going by this calendar? And it made no sense. But anyway, I remember you and Ed left early, and you gave me a bunch of papers, and I went home and I studied those papers, and you told me, you said, have a look at these, and if you got any questions, call me. So when I got home, I basically called you. I think it was probably about a week later. I couldn't believe what I was reading. And anyway, you confirmed what I was reading was true, and I went to every Bible verse. I studied every Bible verse that you had given me, and for about 2 months, I studied it, and I couldn't refute it anymore. Then I realized, no, this was the Lunar Sabbath. Excuse me. But it took me another couple of years after that, quite a few years after that, maybe 2 or 3, before I finally left the church, because the Lord told me I needed to get out. And so this is where I am today. That's my story.
Well, the Spirit just kept putting on me, you need to give her some literature before you leave, something about the Sabbath, but I don't want to. Okay, I will. I'll go over there, to her cabin and give her some papers we had put together to give to people, but I didn't know who would be open, but the Spirit was like leading that you were open, and so that's why I gave you that package. So I'm so thankful, Ellie. I'm so thankful. Go ahead, Appa or Peggy.
Hi, Sister Barb. First, I'd just like to say, Carol. I'd just like to say thank you for the question Q&A for this, because I think it's really important. It definitely is one of the most important for me to hear other people's testimony and how they came to the truth. And so just kind of going back, I had a lot of experiences. A lot of them were supernatural. Things not all good either. Bad when I first came to the faith, when I realized the whole controversy between good and evil was real. I had evil spirit come over the top of me when I was telling my mom it's all real. It was very traumatizing. And then also, too, I had, a supernatural experience where I was explaining this all to my wife because we were both of Catholic. We get married Catholic. She was of Catholic faith, and basically telling her her whole religion was a lie. That was a difficult thing to do. She thought I was a little bit crazy at first when I was sitting down talking to her in a restaurant about this. And my daughter Kira drew some basically these Illuminati symbols, because I was in my research. I was kind of researching all of this controversy on what was going on, and so a lot of what her picture depicted when she was only not even 3 years old depicted all these symbols that I was doing research on, and it was clearly evident that some evil spirit was working through her to describe a situation with me, and it was threatening me, basically saying, basically it was going to kill my family and me. I had my face and eyes scratched out in one of her pictures that she was drawing while we're eating, and a sacrificial thing where there was this alien. She kept on saying, this is alien, and of course there's this demonic entity over this little tiny face, which obviously represented children. So it was very traumatizing to me in the beginning, but at the same token, I got the words that stuck in my mind to serve that, basically after feeling what obviously the evil that was surrounding me, who wants to feel that, or either that or the other. So it was kind of an easy choice, it was kind of a scary choice, but at the same token, because all who live in godly will live in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. So I just felt like, I had to make this choice, and so as I was going through this whole system, I started to see, well, who's evil at war with? I needed to figure out what the right Bible was, what the right church was, and I seen there was a big, long-standing controversy between the Catholic Church and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and so I started doing a bunch of research on the SDA Church. I started reading their writings, Ellen White's writings, basically watching videos. Came to a Mark Clemenson video, and he had a supernatural experience as well. And I thought it was very important, and I started to see the whole Seventh-day Advent and how the attack on the Sabbath day was a critically important doctrine to understand, and I wanted to know the principles behind that and what I needed to do to align with all this. And so I started doing my research on the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I was like, and not all Seventh-day Adventist churches are the same. I heard a lot of bad things about some and a lot of good things about others. And so I decided to go check out my local Seventh-day Adventist church. And he was vetting me as much as I was vetting him. I don't know if I've already read the Bible, but I read a lot of the Bible by then. I read it, real quickly because I was, when you're in a state of fear like that, you read really fast, really hard, really attentive. He started to test me to get in, and I was so thankful when I started to hear all his doctrine, because a lot of it aligned with Scripture, what I believed and what I've researched and all that stuff. And so I sat down with him for almost a whole month. I told him about my past, and it probably concerned him a bit that he wanted to make sure it was real. So once about a month passed by, I was baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but I was in my walk, and I was so happy that I found the remnant church that I had a lot of good signs. The very first sermon that he gave, right when I was soaking wet with the baptism, as I turned right to the page that he said, turn to page this and this, and I was right on that page. So it was a supernatural experience. I had my Bible open to that particular page, and I was like, no way. And there it was, and I was like, I'm here. This is it. And then I started telling everybody the story about the, Saturday Sabbath. And I'm not kidding you, just a couple months, about 3 months later, I was telling my cousin about the Sabbath, and this flash of thought came into my mind, the moon. This word just came into my mind, the moon. It's not based on the moon. Like, no way. And then I went to my computer, and I did a bunch of research on the moon and everything like that, and I started building my case on the moon. I was like, is it on the moon? Is it on the moon? And sure enough, I started seeing all these articles on the moon, and then I started watching YouTube videos, and Of course, Brother Troy was on there. And I had about 12, one day I had about 12, I talked to my pastor and said, hey, something about the moon. And he goes, oh, yeah, some people do worship on the Sabbath day according to the moon. I'm like, really? And so I literally avoided church for about a week or two. And that whole time I was doing research on the moon. I wanted to make sure that I'm not being fooled, and because I don't, I've already, because it was, I was already really deep in with the Seventh-day Adventist Church in terms of how much Ellen White writings I actually read. I read a lot of her writings really fast, and because I really do believe that she had the spirit of prophecy, and it was a remnant at one time. And but then I watched Brother Troy's. I was sitting at my computer, and I had about 12 slides pulled up. I'm doing all this research, and all of a sudden I heard this, my computer turned off, and I just was walking around, and I heard this voice come out, and I thought it was basically a spirit talking to me. And I'm like walking around the room and walking behind the couch thinking, oh, this is something, saying something, because it was just in between pauses. And then I went to my computer was off, and then I was like, it's my computer, and I put my head next to it, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh, okay. Then it started coming from my computer again. I was like, oh. So I felt silly, but I switched back, and I was like, oh, there's nothing on, though. I looked at the front of the screen, I was like, there's nothing on. And I could still hear it coming out of the speakers, and I started flipping behind all these YouTube videos. I started going on the X, to get out of the window, and finally came up to Brother Troy Miller's window in my screen, and there he was speaking on the Lunar Sabbath and principles around new moon and all these other things, and so he was talking about the clock and everything like that, and it just blew my mind. And so, of course, I did what I would normally do. I did continue my research, and I thought, I got to figure this thing out. So I built a huge case, and I literally grabbed tons of documents, the truth document about Seventh-day Adventist Church hiding it, and I just stacked them all in a big binder and got my evidence, and I brought it into my Pastor Jeff from Seventh-day Adventist Church in Wasilla, out in Wasilla, and I brought it this big binder into him. I stuck it on his desk, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't stay in the church anymore. And he's like, well, how come? I was like, well, because the Sabbath is based off the moon. I go, and it's a luminary calendar, and I just can't follow the Seventh-day Adventist Church anymore, and here's why. And I gave him his document. Of course, he gave me a document that rebutted that document that I had, but I looked at that guy's document, and I didn't have to get very far before I knew that there were very, very weak arguments that he was making against that rebuttal of the Seventh-day Adventist Church hiding the calendar, which I thought was critical. I mean, that's the whole point, right? We weigh everything, and he's like, I'm not going to get you back, am I? And I was like, no, I'm sorry. And so I went on to Troy's. I called up Troy, and got, of course, I gave him my email and everything like that, and he ended up calling me back right away, and I told him what happened to me and everything like that, and he goes, yeah, I had a couple other people that had kind of supernatural experiences like that, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, great. And then he sent out, I was keeping track of his newsletter, and then there were some invitations going out from some people, and that's how I ran into Sister Abby and Sister Linda were on that list, and I joined their list of people that were going to celebrate the feast with them. They had it at Sister Irma and Dan's, who also were coming out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, or who were kind of teetering between. And a lot of people that were at our feast were, both, kind of coming into the truth of the lunar Sabbath, and knowing that God's calendar was a different calendar than obviously the Gregorian calendar. And we were practicing, of course, the new Sabbath, which was, of course, difficult, right, for our work. We had to be like, how are we going to bring this to our bosses? Both of us had pretty high-profile jobs. I traveled a lot. I worked a lot, and everybody's calendar is based on the Gregorian calendar, so it made things difficult. My boss even wanted to fire me in the beginning. I could tell when somebody's countenance towards you changes, and he could see how it's going to conflict with everything. He tried to almost for a second, but then he realized that there's actually laws against him doing that. So that made him back off, but I could tell, it wasn't the same, obviously, after that. And I don't mind. I didn't mind giving up my job because it didn't work. I look at it from not just my perspective, but their perspective as well. Somebody needs to be there for them in that capacity and that need, and I was okay with that. And because of my type of job, it would cause a certain amount of strain, and it's not just about them, about our needs, but it's also about their needs as well. And so I decided that it wasn't the best fit anymore, and so that we would figure out a type of ministry, and that, of course, is to come back to Yakutat and spread some truth here to the people in the churches here and things like that. But it was quite an experience. In my experience, I've noticed that there was a lot of people that came out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I've talked to church leaders. I talked to the leader of the Free Adventist Church, which is a primarily a black, basically segment of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but I actually talked with the president chair, and he was basically the chair of the board of that church, and he was saying that people are coming out, and it's such a threat that one of the testimonies that I got when I was there at a healing medical missionary program is that they actually were calling us lunatics because we believed in the Sabbath that is based off the moon. So lunatic was what we heard, and they didn't know that we were actually Sabbath keepers. And so, there's a lot you probably don't hear about yourself, from people in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because only time people get really offended is obviously what you're doing and saying is actually a threat to their establishment. If you're not a threat, nobody really cares. So, but there are actually people that are leaving that church, because they want to follow truth. And so it's been an interesting experience, talking to Seventh-day Adventists about this Lunar Sabbath. And I don't know how many people, obviously we don't know how many people are converted because of the seeds that we plant, or sometimes it's just a part of it. But it's critically important that we go to Seventh-day Adventists, obviously, because if you look at a lot of the people that are worshiping and that are coming to the truth, they're following a lot of truth already as a result of their walk with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I mean, you look at how that's very similar to what Jesus was doing in the beginning when he was obviously commanding his disciples to go to Israel first. Before spreading the gospel to the entire world. And so I think there's a parallel there, and I think that's why you see a large number of Seventh-day Adventists being converted and coming out of the church. I think that they were a remnant at a certain point in time, or I wouldn't say a part of the remnant, because obviously anybody who keeps the commandments is important as far as being God's God. But I just think that well, anyways, that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. I tried to the story, but it's been an interesting journey. So thanks for letting me share it.
Oh, thank you. And I love your story. And each one of us has a story. I went through supernatural experience too, and I thought I was going to die. And I said, I don't care what happens. I choose Jesus, because I thought I was going to die in that prayer. And so I'm glad I chose him, and he's been in my life ever since. And I was a young lady at that time. And I'm so thankful for my SDA heritage and so many people that have testified here today. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, came out of the Sunday church and going by the Bible truths, already walking in them. And Ellen White has a wonderful writings, and even in early writings, page 33, she says, at the commencement, at the time of trouble, we went forward to proclaim the Sabbath more fully, but nominal Adventists were very angry. So I like that quote. But for those of you that aren't from Adventist background, she was a great author, and she was even quoted by Paul Harvey quite a bit. Tanya and Daniel.
Okay, hi, this is Brother Daniel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, Barbara, and everyone that's here on the fellowship. I was just listening to the gentleman that preceded me. It was fascinating because, like you, I had some supernatural experiences, but my journey to the Lunar Sabbath wasn't as startling and as dynamic as a lot of you alls were. In a convoluted way, I have to thank Donald Trump for my stumbling onto this truth, because he coined the moniker fake news. And I was perusing, I was studying in my little study, and I was a dyed in the wool, die-hard Seventh-day Saturday keeper. I've only been in one church in my entire life, and I stumbled into that church in my early 20s, and I thought I had found nirvana, and the truth to end all truths. And I believed all that, and I stumbled across that website of the World's Last Chance that said Saturday is the Sabbath is fake news. And I was curious. I thought they were going to attack my Saturday Sabbath and tried to justify a Sunday worship. And I tuned into that thing because I was going to, in my mind, I was going to tear them a new Torah, and I was surprised that they weren't talking about Sunday. And I was, when I realized that, they had captured my attention. And I only had to watch it one time, and I soaked up every bit of truth that they spilled out in that short presentation. And there was no question in my mind that it was the truth, because everything that they had set forth in that little presentation was pretty much indisputable. And I had read enough of the Bible to realize that once I put some of those principles about the calendation into practice in my readings of the Bible, things snapped into place chronologically, and the Bible began to make sense chronologically. And the feast days began to line up, and all of those things that I always had questions about the crucifixion and the resurrection and those dates and the high Sabbath and things like that would not synchronize under any other accounting of time, just vividly came into a focus, using the chronology of the Lunar Sabbath system. So that was the thing that really sealed the deal for me. Now, unfortunately, I was so used to fellowship. Fellowship is something that I desperately need, and I knew not to try to approach the congregation I was attached to with that, because it was just going to sow a bunch of confusion and bad feelings. So I knew that, I needed to find a fellowship, someplace where I can continue to, grow and learn with, other people, like-minded people. And that eluded me for a while. And that organization, World's Last Chance, is as great as its accomplishments have been. They just proved a little too egalitarian for my taste. I didn't. I had to look for something that was a little more conservative, because that's kind of how I am. And so I was really delightfully pleased to run across this website and this fellowship and family, and I've been blessed ever since. So that's not as exciting as some of the other testimonies I've heard, but it was enough for me, and I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Daniel. It was good to meet you and Tanya, and every testimony is so important, and like I said, I'm very thankful for my heritage, and I believe the Sabbath is called the loud cry, and we are to give the loud cry and tell others about the true Sabbath that is in the scriptures. And I know many of you have mentioned World Last Chance, Lady Gracie, Brother Troy. I mean, the message is going out, and every time I get new emails from other people, different countries and different people, sometime maybe we'll read some of those letters. But, okay, I guess we'll go ahead and close. I just want to say, to access more information about the calendar and the calendar in the heavens and the Sabbath and feast days, and how it was all changed and how we ended up with a Gregorian calendar, please go to our website, lunarsabbathday.com. And please like if this was a blessing to you, and share it with your friends that love Yeshua. And it has been a wonderful time of sharing our faith and experience with one another today. So thank you, everyone.